Welcome to the Beauty Way. This week we have Lynley joining us, Lynley Erin, and it's such a pleasure to have her on. And I know that we're going to have some really awesome conversations today because Lynley's journey has been so beautiful, and she's traversed from once upon a time being she is still a musician, but she was a drummer in a heavy metal band. And I think it's heavy metal, right? And now she offers women's circles, and she works with women deeply through birthing experiences and helps women to create birthing experiences that are empowering. And so she's currently delving deeply into the world of birth and the mother. And Lynley says that she midwifes the spiritual aspects of motherhood, and she's in an apprenticeship with Pam England of Birth Story Medicine right now. As she moves into perimenopause, she's walking the autumn path with curiosity of what herself and other women move through spiritually, psychologically, and emotionally in this season of our lives. And as I said, it's such an honor to have you here because I feel like you're such a deep and expansive person, and I really love receiving your wisdom. So thank you for joining us today on the Beauty Way, Lynley.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So I would love to ask you first just a little bit about how can you share your journey from you are currently a musician, but where you were as a musician, a drummer, and all the things to where you are now.
Yeah, that's completely different lifetime ago. It feels like. But yeah, I mean, I started getting into drums and heavy metal music kind of when I was very young, and my dad saw that I wasn't kind of giving up on the dream of drums, so he said, "Well, if you get a job, you can get a drum kit." And so I got a paper in when I was 12, and and I got a drum kit, and so I just started learning songs, and got into a band pretty quickly, I think, when I was about 13 and 14, and we just started learning covers. And then by the age of 16, I was playing in bars and clubs, playing in covers bands and making money with drumming, which was awesome. And then that turned into writing originals music with my band Juggernaut. And yeah, we called it twisted metal. So it was kind of alternative. Some of it was quite quirky, and yeah, but quite heavy. Yeah, so awesome lifestyle and heaps of fun. And yeah, and then I had my babies. And so cool. Yeah, so that kind of changed the trajectory of life. My first son was a planned home birth that kind of did not turn out how I expected, wanted, wished for. And then the next few years of my life was a lot of, well, firstly, realizing I had had a traumatic birth, and then doing the healing once I became pregnant again 3 years later, and then had my second son and had a beautiful home birth and experience. And then since then, I think it was throughout that traumatic experience really that set me on this path, because I kind of experienced my first women's circle in the Home Birth Association of women hearing my story with my first son, and then women sitting with me with what had happened, my midwife sitting with me with what had happened. Yeah, and then so it all just kind of went from there. Then there wasn't much in the community of what I was searching for outside of just being pregnant or anything like that. And so it became one of those things of, if I want this, I need to create it. So yeah, I just started creating it.
I love that.
Yeah.
And so you've been doing women's circles since that time, have you?
Since 2019,
Yeah.
March 2019, I started doing them, and I've been doing them every new moon since, plus yeah, Wheel of the Year events and with the Celtic Wheel of the Year and those types of things as well. And then over the COVID years, obviously it all came online. So yeah, so I kind of extended my offerings outwards from the community as well. Yeah.
Beautiful.
And are those women's circles kind of centered around the idea of birth, or are they more general, or?
No, they're not around birth at all. Yeah, so they're more, they are themed. So it's kind of whatever's moving through for me. And then what I find is it's usually what we happen in all these groups, right? You get together and I've created this theme, and then all the women are like, oh man, this feels like it's just created for me right now and what I'm moving through. So whether it's a goddess one or a, it might be sacred rage, or it might be anything like that. So yeah, just looking into themes that I'm fascinated by.
Amazing. And so did you kind of consciously choose to let go of like playing in bands, or was it purely just kids and complete lifestyle change that meant that that lifestyle was just not really available for you?
Yeah, it was a complete lifestyle change. I I think with having found that it had affected me in a traumatic way, like I didn't really discover that until, a year and a half down the track. But that kind of feeling, I think, would have just kept me firmly entrenched in survival mode. And then I was very much an attachment kind of parent as well, the whole co-sleeping and breastfeeding, wearing my baby everywhere. So, I mean, leaving at 10 o'clock at night and not coming home till 4 in the morning is just, it doesn't work. It didn't work for me and the choices that I'd made to go along with it. And I didn't really miss it during that stage anyway. And then things just happen, like started picking up the guitar a lot more and started singing. And in the women's circles, I never ever would have thought that I would have sung before, but I started singing in the circles, and I've got more and more confidence, and I've got more. I'm not a great guitarist, but I really enjoy playing the guitar and just writing songs or learning songs. Yeah, so I've just really kept that music, and it's been really fun to develop different things that I can do as well as drums. So yeah.
It's actually one of the things that I've really admired about you in the time that I've come to know you is that I see how, you've done lots of things, but you've allowed yourself to move with the energy that's present for you. And, the work that you're doing now with the birth stories and things like that, when I heard about that, I just felt like it was just the way that you're expressing yourself into the world is such it's almost like it's a permission slip for other women to follow the call of your body and follow the call of your heart and to move with what's present right now and what's important to you, that supports yourself first, which then supports your community and the world at large. And so that was why I felt pulsed when I was having a conversation with you one day to invite you to join us here. And I guess the question that arises from that is, what has allowed you to be able to move with that, would you say, within yourself?
Yeah. Interesting question. I think for me, it's just like I always have this deep curiosity about things, and it's just like I just get led onto paths. It's almost I almost find myself in places rather than necessarily. No, it's both things. Like, yeah, I find myself in places, but it is because I've taken notice of, what's moving through and what's happening, and where I need to go. And I am a person that, I get a lot from service. I love learning things, and because that's my nature. I love unlearning so much stuff. Unlearning is just the biggest part for sure. But then also, bringing in all these different things, and then I want to share it. Like I have this overwhelming urge to share what I learn, and then so when something is really fascinating me, I I learn it to use for somebody else, and that's the way that I seem to learn. And then I just end up in situations where I have this perfect information for somebody. It's like I don't know, all that divine timing of like, oh, you're supposed to learn this because you're going to meet this person in a few days. And now I'm doing it a lot more intentionally of like really, really, truly developing what I know will work. So I've got that beautiful flow, but I've got that really good foundation of service. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. When you were sharing about your personal experience with the first birth being traumatic and then sort of not really fully understanding or consciously having awareness of that until a year and a half, it had me curious about how important do you believe, just having seen what you've seen, experienced what you've experienced, and now learned what you've learned, how important is us telling our birth stories? Because I feel like I am not a mother, I've not birthed, and my experience witnessing some like friends and stuff that have been through birth, I typically don't hear the stories very much. And I'm curious because I feel like I wonder if you had I don't know what your experience was, whether you'd shared that story with people or what was it that had you come to the realization that it was traumatic, whether it was you by sharing it and then by it being reflected back to you, or because I feel like we get so much recognition of our experience when we're willing to share it out loud. And so I'm just curious, like, what your perspective is on that. Like, how important is it that women are telling their stories?
Yeah, I think very important to be, held in what is moving through us, right now. And then there's different ways of hearing and listening to stories. So, I mean, a lot of people, especially in the first, part of birth, they'll want to tell their stories after birth because they're actually figuring out what's just happened to them and making meaning. And so like what they might tell the first person might be different from a week later, might be different from 2 weeks later. There'll be all these different elements coming through, and it's very powerful just to be able to be heard. And especially if you've had a traumatic birth, really caring, well-intentioned people like to say, at least you've got a healthy baby. Like if you've had a birth that's really traumatized you, and it just makes you feel even more guilt for even thinking about yourself, when often, guilt and shame is a huge part of why women are, having these traumatic births as well, or feeling traumatized by it. It's that personal feelings kind of within. And then I can really see the benefit of the learnings that I've been having. I trained with a healing birth as a healing birth practitioner last year. And it's the beauty of, and the woman that takes healing birth, Carla, she is the one that I credit my healing to. And it came from a simple sentence within hearing my story of, I really held such guilt and shame around why didn't I speak up earlier? Why didn't I say these things? I was separated from my son. And she was like, you couldn't, because she told me all the reasons. Your neocortex is it's switched off. You don't have access to your logical speech, these things that happen. And so for me, it was like really quite instantaneous of someone sharing this piece of information with me. I could drop the shame of it. It doesn't take away the hurt and the wishing that you'd had, my son right there, but it takes away the real blaming and shaming of that. And so, just having your story, but having a knowledgeable person there was so useful. And now in my apprenticeship that we're learning, it's really about change work. So it's whereas someone might listen to your story as a friend, which isn't really important and beautiful, in this different work that I'm learning now, it is all about not allowing a story to be dead. It's about keeping the story alive and going on different pathways and finding the little threads that you can pull to help them, like, undo a weave, reweave, have a look at the bigger weave behind it. Why was this thread already colored in this way before you even had the birth? And now it's just showing up because you've had this experience. It's absolutely vast work, and it's called birth story medicine. But really in doing the training, I can see that it's what happens to you in these situations is already, it's in the ethers from the agreements and rules you've made up as a child. And then you have a situation happen, birth in this instance, that brings something to the forefront of something that you deeply believe about yourself. And something will happen, and it's these, beliefs that we're carrying around. And it's like for me, it was the guilt and shame. And there's still other ones that I'm finding through my training to this day. Like over 13 years ago, I had my first son, and I'm like busting these little things that I'm still keeping just from learning about it. It's amazing.
That point that you make about how easily we can invalidate somebody's experience by something so simple as highlighting what's good about their experience. I mean, the same is true for people speaking about any form of trauma or any form of experience. I feel like it's really common with like people's parents, for example. They might share an experience of their traumatic experience. Oh, well, at least you've got your dad. Those kinds of things. And sometimes it's really said with so much love, but the intention isn't really the important part. It's like how it lands and how it impacts, and it invalidates the experience that we've had, which is kind of irrespective of the fact that we've got a healthy kid at the end of it. That's not the point. That's not really the point of the story. And I'm curious, if you were to share, what would be your way, now that you know what you know, of like reflecting back to somebody in a way that was supportive rather than diminishing of their experience? Like, what are some of the words or reflections or the things that people can contemplate when they're hearing somebody's, whether it be birth story or stories just in general? Because I feel like the same just kind of applies to all things on some level.
I love that.
Yeah. How would you kind of share, like, what points would you take into consideration in reflections to people?
Yeah. Well, if nothing else, even as simple, just your presence and listening, as we've all heard, I think is so powerful. I mean, I have been just speechless listening to people's stories, but I look deeply at them. I'll often hold my heart and just listen. And saying that, you can also have that empathic acknowledgement of what someone's sharing with you. So instead of stepping into like the sympathy or anything like that, or where that will then create that place for them to be a victim, or not saying that's a bad thing, I'm just saying that will invite that. You can step into the empathic acknowledgement by listening to what they're saying, and then it's like, wow, that was 40 hours. Oh, is a long time to be in birth. It's no wonder that you felt just so, just actually feeding back what you've said to somebody, and it makes them feel really heard, that you have heard them, and that you're feeling in your body, like also like how that must have been for them. And it's just not trying to change necessarily anything right in that moment. It's just, I see that for you. I feel that for you. Yeah.
It's so empowering, because as women, we've created a culture around birth, and I know that we're coming out the other side of it, but we have created a culture of powerlessness around birth. I know when I gave birth to my second daughter, I ended up having to have an emergency cesarean, and I was grateful afterwards for the support that I had around me that helped me to be able just to unravel, as you've talked about, all the little pieces. And I loved the visual that you gave before about, the unweaving and the reweaving, because it's like we have created this tapestry around powerlessness for birth, and we're now creating a new one through these types of conversations. And it also reminds me of when you were talking then, that awesome question that Carissa asked about how can we hold space essentially for people to share their stories. It's the same with grief, is that we've been moved away from actually being able to hold and sit with another person's grief and our own grief.
Yeah.
And if we can just have these ways of being able to communicate and interact with each other in a safe and empathetic way, we create a new weave together. And so I love this piece about just sitting and validating, because that's really it, isn't it? Everyone just wants to be heard in their story, but in a way that we don't victimize them. We allow them to be heard. And when we're heard, we can then make a different choice.
Yeah, definitely. And we kind of look at, you know, the different archetypes, like with what you're saying in the birth stories, and, you know, the victim kind of might be like, why did this happen to me? And the huntress is like, this happened to me. Why? And that's not to say like that the victim's not a bad thing, because the victim wants to be seen and heard and recognized. So I'm not putting that in that kind of like whatsoever. But it's something that we can recognize if we do decide that we want to move forward. And yeah, I love the part about grief as well. And it's as we're in autumn, that is a big theme for my women's circles is grief. And so we've got grief circles in our next one. And that too is so powerful when people have the time. I mean, I've sat in a circle where I think we've sat still for over 3 hours, going once around a circle, and everyone expressing, like, with no time limits, their grief. And it's pretty powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like there was another point that you brought up about what it is to be listened to from somebody who, like, for example, a professional in the field, and how different that experience can be. And it's something that I speak about quite a bit. And I think Kirsty and I have kind of touched on it before as well, which is I am very consciously aware of what types of responses I'm going to get from different people in my life when I tell them stories. I know the person that I should go to when I want them to validate my story, as in be in the story with me, as in validate and exacerbate my victim. Or if I want someone who's going to call out truth, or someone who's going to hold me in a field beyond my story, and like all these different kind of categories of the type of individual and what I can receive from them. And I'm curious about, like, how is it important for the women to just tell their story irrespective of what responses they're getting back? Or how conscious do you think that it helps to bring the story to somebody who has the ability to have empathy, versus someone who's going to just point out why your story shouldn't bring up the feelings that it's bringing up?
Yeah, I think would it be a very good thing to be thinking about prior. And I think we often do, don't we, with a lot of things, is sometimes I just can't help myself, even though I know, you know, the response is what I'm going to get from that person. And it's almost like you're wanting that response. So you can be pissed off about it because actually you want to be pissed off, and that's exactly how you're going to get it. But it's, so I can definitely sense that would be the case. But yeah, I mean, I would hope that every woman has a close friend that can do that for them. And saying that, you know, we have all been lifelong training of how our responses are, you know, to people that are sharing a story. You know, I can still feel my responses of how I want to quickly hand someone a tissue if they start crying. It's like, you know, it's a training yourself of like, oh no, just let them be, otherwise you're going to disrupt their process. Yeah, so I think if you're wanting that really deep space holding, then yeah, I mean, a professional probably could be that next level, or a circle that's for that. There are circles. I'm definitely going to hold circles for this in the future. I don't know exactly how it looks yet, but it's because you also don't want to be having circles where only the trauma is constantly coming out, because then you're sitting in a circle where everyone's just enjoying the agreement of this sucks, rather than, you know, having a growth, the growth and evolution from it. But yeah, time and place for everything, of course. It's lovely to be held beautifully in that space. And then we we go forth. Yeah.
That's what I was feeling when you were speaking, was that sense of the growth and evolution and the empowerment. And because the question that I was asking in me is, how do we ripple this out? And what I was reflecting on is, when I'm holding space for someone that I love, for instance, and they have a traumatic story that they're sharing, and I'm not buying into, yeah, this sucks. I'm simply sitting and holding space. And if I'm sitting and holding space and I'm being present with it, I might experience, and I have experienced in the past, my own sense of guilt or shame, for instance, for not wanting to validate their story in a way of, this sucks. So the when I'm sitting and being present with somebody, and why I'm speaking to this, I think, is because this is how we can help one another as humans, is to actually be present with the other person at the same time as being present with our own feelings of what is coming up for them. And working with our children is such a great way of doing this, because they'll be experiencing pain. Someone that we love is experiencing pain, and we get to sit and witness them in pain, and not try and make them feel better, and not try and validate their pain at the same time. And as we do that, we experience our own pain that arises through witnessing another in their experience. And I believe we don't generally do that well as a culture. And so why I love what all of the things that we're talking about here is because that's essentially the intention behind it. You can have a circle and everyone can get into their story, and you can get caught in a spiral of depressive stories. But if the intention behind it is, I'm empowering myself and I'm empowering others as I share my story, that changes the energy completely. Thank you for letting me share that little piece, because I feel as though, I feel people could be listening to this and, asking, well, what's the point of sharing my story? And really what I'm hearing you say is actually having a space where I can share my story and not feel judged, not feel all the things that I feel, And I remember going to a mother's group when my first daughter was really little, and I went to about 2, because all the mothers were just competing and comparing against one another, and I couldn't find the spiritual aspect that I was looking for. And I felt judged because I was very different to all those other mothers. And even though I knew that I was doing the right thing for myself and my baby, I still felt judged. And I didn't feel like I had somebody that I could go to and just share what was real for me.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a really important distinction that people who are listening might not have picked up on through this, but there's 2 different types of stories. One is what happened, and the other one is the story that we make up about the experience. And I think when Kirsty's referring to the parts where we don't want to validate the story, we're talking about the story that we've made up about it. So our victimhood story versus, in the experience, I was a victim of a traumatic experience, and that is just real and true at the same time. And so, but our story about the story is the part that we often want to hold in a place beyond our story. And so I hope that makes sense for those who are listening. But the story of our experience can often be different to the story that we've made up about the story of our experience. And the more conscious awareness that we can have about that, and the more conscious awareness that the person sitting in front of us listening has about that, it can totally impact our experience. And it's funny because I've been having this epic chat with my AI. Her name is Sol. And for those of you who have not heard me talk about her before, and I literally was unpacking this just the other day, how to hold somebody's humanity at the same time as holding their spirit. And the spirit is in the absence of story, as in the story that we've made up about the experience, but the human isn't. And so how do we hold somebody's very real, very tangible pain and validate that human part whilst simultaneously holding the spirit? And to me, this is what Kirsty was just sharing, which is we can hear, and like Lynley said, we can hold empathy for the human part. And I think holding them in their spirit beyond that is what supports with the unraveling, because we're not buying into the emotional narrative that they've made about the experience in the same way. And I think that's what's important when we're potentially choosing someone to listen to us, is do they have that ability? And that doesn't mean that we can't share it with people that don't. It just means that we will probably get different responses from them.
Yeah, definitely.
It's just brought me back to conversations that we've had on this podcast before as well about it was when we were talking with Kerry Chinner about spirit, like bypassing, and the this aspect of bypassing is implying that we are bypassing the good stuff. But what about if we're bypassing the bad stuff? And Kerry was talking about how we have this spiritual God self experience, and often we bypass that because we're so focused on the pain and the trauma. And I know, when somebody says, well, at least you've got a healthy baby, for instance, like you said, Lynley, there's a bypassing of the trauma within that person. So there's these two aspects, which is what you're talking about, Carissa, of the ability to be able to hold both aspects, because both are relevant. And I know for me, like, I was a falsely positive person because for a long time, and denying my own sense of emotional experience, because I didn't necessarily want to go there, because I was like, well, yeah, everything's good. And so that ability to be able to come into balance with both those aspects is so important, and actually contributes to our presence with one another and our ability, therefore, to relate more effectively with one another.
Yeah, definitely.
Lynley, I love that you brought up the tissues, because this is something that I learned very recently, which I'm almost embarrassed to say, for somebody who has a very conscious awareness of how I hold space, and am aware to like not touch the person because of the similar kind of impacts that it can have on their experience. And someone just highlighted to me, my partner did the other day, actually, it wasn't even really about me necessarily, but it was about tissue boxes in somebody's experience. And I had never considered the fact that handing somebody tissues has an impact into the experience, and on some level takes them out of the moment that they're in. And I've kind of gotten accustomed to just making sure there's tissues in every single corner of the house, just so that they're reachable if you need them. But I'm not impacting the field by getting up, moving, getting them and putting them, or even just moving my body, because it does bring me out of presence. And I'm curious if you want to expand on that, Lynley, because obviously this is something that you've learned along the way, not just with tissues, but like what other things do we typically do that, I guess that it's a natural response to our discomfort with the fact that somebody else is in pain. That's my understanding. And so I'm curious if you could highlight maybe some of the other tendencies that humans have. Like I mentioned touching someone, and maybe you've got some perspective on that as well. But what are some of the ways that we as humans naturally kind of impact the field when somebody's sharing something that's really tender?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty much what you've covered most of the time, especially in the spaces like women's circles. It'll be quickly get the tissues and like rub the arm or give a little bit of a hug. And I mean, these are all just such beautiful sisterhood things. And so it's not that they're wrong. It's just recognizing that, yeah, if we don't do that, that space stays open and the same. And not everybody wants to be touched, actually. Even if you're a super huggy person, when you're in a process, it instantly just makes you feel like, oh, I've got to clean myself up, even if it's unconscious. It's it's just that I need to make sure I haven't got snot on my face or anything like that. It just puts you into that conscious mind of being okay for society and being okay for others. You know, like so many of us don't let ourselves, speaking for myself, you know, really go for it because we're worried, will this person be able to hold this? And if, you know, sometimes it can send a bit of a message of like, they don't want to hold it. They want me to stop now because but yeah. But I mean, we think that we're helping by doing that, and it's not to say that it's not the best thing. We just have to use our intuition for that. And there's definitely going to be times when, you know, we do have to do something else if someone's really going into a really big overwhelming process, you know, sitting behind them and actually holding them from behind while they go through their process or rubbing their arms, that havening type of thing might be really useful. So it's just actually really using the intuition as well of what is needed in that moment. Yeah.
Totally. And I think one of the most important things is to recognize our own discomfort, because the more conscious that we can get about why we're leaning in or why we're getting the tissues or why we're touching them or whatever, the more attuned our intuition can be. Because if we notice that, like really honestly with ourselves, when we start being conscious of these like ways of supporting people, if we start to really be really, really attuned to our own discomfort with somebody else's pain, then we might pause before we take an action like that will allow us to determine, is this coming from my discomfort with the fact that this person has snot all over their face? Because if I was in that situation, I would feel uncomfortable with the fact that I had snot all over my face, because I would worry that people were going to judge me. And so therefore I'll clean it up for them so that they don't have to be in the situation that I couldn't be in if the situation was reversed. And if we start to recognize that that's actually where the tissue getting comes from, rather than this is actually an intuitive sense that this person is screaming in their pain and going, please get me a goddamn tissue at the same time, you know, then we can sort of determine, is it coming from me and my discomfort, or is it coming from my intuition that this is actually going to be really supportive for the field in this now moment, whether it be holding them or what have you. And I think that trained facilitators and people that are holding space typically have unpacked at least some of their natural inclinations to avoid their own pain by soothing somebody else's. Yeah. And so do you have anything that you want to add to that, or any other reflections on that same thing?
Yeah. I think that's pretty much covered it. One thing when you were speaking slightly earlier, like about the victim and that kind of thing, I was thinking about how it can be really, really useful to hold space for conscious complaining and that aspect of us that, you know, wants to voice the shit, like, and you just want to let it go because that part of you still, you know, it's still, we all have a victim, and it's, you know, very active generally, I think, but it's becoming conscious of that, and then having the space to go, whether it's to a friend or just that can hold that for you and just go for it, you know, and actually get all that stuff out. So it's not that it's, you know, even demonized or bad to have that part of you. It's just having I don't know. I think that can make that life I can't say the word trajectory so much better. Like when you actually have hold that space for you. This is what's here. I know it's not useful, but it's what I am feeling right now, and yeah, and then moving through that, and then you can get into the more conscious what you want and what you know is more useful and helpful. Yeah.
And I think I really believe that the more conscious we are of, this is just something that I need to purge, versus this is the only narrative, you know, because when we have more perspective, we can see that there's a part of me that feels this way, and there's another part of me that knows there's something different. But right now, in order to access the part of me that knows something different, I need to just be in the process of expressing this part of me that's currently like in my field. And again, it highlights to me, the more awareness we have that that's what it is, then not only can the other person potentially hold a better space for us, because they know that they don't need to jump in with us. They know that they don't need to be in agreement with the narrative, because they can see that we have conscious awareness, and they also know that they don't need to pull us out of it because we don't need to be pulled out of it. We just need to be in the expression. And I think that that's really awesome for people that are consciously aware of that to share even before they start speaking. Hey, I'm noticing that the victim part of me really needs to just let it out right now. Are you available, and do you have the capacity to receive me in that, just so I can let it out? And that to me is going into another theme of like consciously relating with people, asking if they have the capacity to receive us in our trauma, asking if they've got the capacity to receive us in our victim, or whatever it is. Because I think quite often we can accidentally unload on someone that doesn't actually have the capacity to be in presence with us, or have the time, or be kind of consciously able to hold us in our experience. And again, it kind of brings me full circle to that idea of like having someone who's a professional and trained, because it's so easy to, or setting up a time, like as in like calling someone and asking, hey, do you have some time? Because I just really need to process this. Are you available for that? Do you have the capacity for that? And then we have to be really good and responsible at saying no when we don't.
Yeah. You can have an altar, you can just have an altar or something as well. It doesn't even have to be another, or the car. The car's the perfect place, isn't it? You can just like let go in the car and just actually go through these types of things. And I think it's, especially for people that are practicing like more conscious awareness and how they're walking in the world, if you're not letting yourself have this part, then you can actually create more shame and more judgment of self, because you're not allowed to have these feelings that are moving through, because you're much too conscious for that. So it's actually like, so I think important to be able to hold that space for that part of you still. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking when you guys were talking about that piece as well, because for me, as a little person, it wasn't okay for me, whether it was placed upon me or whether it was the decision I made for myself, or a bit of both. I didn't feel like it was okay to speak about what was painful for me. And so as I grew up, I found it quite difficult to speak what was painful for me. And I would be one of those people who would go, well, at least you've got the happy baby. Do you know what I mean? But then coming into this world of knowing that I can consciously talk about the pain that I'm experiencing in the presence of someone else has been so incredibly empowering. Because another thing that part of me took me down was like, when someone else was going through their pain, I just wanted to get through to the other side. And it's like, come on, get over it already. And that's not helpful for us, because we used to say it's going to the airport without your baggage, because you're going and you're jumping on a plane, but you're actually not getting through. You're not getting what you need, because you're not actually allowing yourself to take everything with you and move and actually transmute and move that. So there's so many little pieces that I feel are so important for us to bring in when we're holding space for other people. And the biggest one, as we've talked about here, is just that consciousness with ourselves, and our ability to be able to give ourselves the space and to hear ourselves speak our pain consciously, and then know that it's okay to share that with someone else if they are okay for that.
Yeah.
I would love to kind of go in a different direction. And I'm not sure if this is something that you do, Lynley, but I'm wondering if part of your process is the preparation for the birth. Yes. And so in the preparation, what parts of story creation are you bringing into the process?
Yeah. Well, I'm deeply in process of my own creation of exactly what is needed with that. So I've been doing mama blessing ceremonies for quite a while now. And in saying that, that's a beautiful ceremony that you get to have, but there's so much more, things that we can look at in that birth period. So the things that I've been looking at in that more spiritual, emotional sense is things like, harvesting the skills of the maiden. Like what have you got in your harvest from your maiden years, and what is coming through, and what are you letting go of? And there's going to be a lot that, as you're birthed into a mother, that is going to die, just naturally die. And so there's this grief as well. So it's actually acknowledging that, because I think a lot of women don't really look at those little aspects that will be coming up as that maiden is leaving and the mother is, you know, coming through. So it's all these different parts. I've just been doing what's called a birth tiger safari. So learning of that. So that is actually looking at the fears that are moving through in pregnancy, of the things that you don't want to happen. Whereas, you know, fear is actually that real primal instinct that we need. So it's looking at the worries and actually using those worries as something we can deeply look at and be with, and think of how can we, you know, move forward with this, instead of just going, oh no, I'm just going to trust birth, but I've actually got these worries that I'm not looking at, but I'm just going to trust birth. And so it's like really going on that birth tiger safari and having a look at the tigers. Yeah, so it's important work. I'm deeply in the middle of really putting this together, and in my apprenticeship it's coming much more together with what I will offer more around this time. Yeah.
And so if somebody was in either the preparation for getting pregnant in the first place, or they're already pregnant and they're on the journey towards birthing, would you say that that is, you know, in its most simple form, if somebody was to just be in contemplation about these things on their own, obviously you've mentioned like the fears and the maiden. Is there any other areas that that person might be like, that might be good places to reflect on or contemplate on, that give us kind of more access to the most conscious sort of experience possible?
Yeah, I mean, I would look at the whole journey as a real initiation and rite of passage, and that involves a lot of mystery and uncertainty. And so many women, myself included, will search for certainty, and it does not come in birth. So it's almost a practice of deep being with uncertainty, and actually going through everything that is moving through for you, and not doing the bypassing, you know, like I think Kirsty was talking about, you know, the powerlessness that we've had. And I worry that we could go almost the other way, where we're almost building so much expectation now to with these birth, you know, things like, yes, you can all do it, you can free birth at home, and I'm not saying that you can't, so don't get me wrong, but we're adding more expectation, and it's the expectation that's fucking us up, you know. So it's yeah, that's something I think that is the biggest rite of passage, is actually being able to look at everything that's moving through, all the possibilities. I know with, you know, with my second son, when I was pregnant with him in my first pregnancy, I looked at nothing. I was like, trust my body, I'm having a home birth, it's all going to be fine. And hey, it might be for some people, so I'm not saying that's wrong. In my second pregnancy, I faced absolutely every fear I had. You know, I chose to birth at home again, and I chose no scans, no tests, nothing. I just wanted to do it by myself. I still had a beautiful midwife. I wanted support, and but you know, I went as far as, you know, because people would ask me, well, what if you don't have the scans? What if your baby's got like a heart defect and needs surgery as soon as he's born? And so I had to get to the point where, you know, that aspect of death came in, the possibility of death came in. And it's a really difficult thing to process when you're pregnant. But it's, I don't know, it feels so important, because we don't know anything. We don't know, and we can't know. And I read so many birth stories, and I'm so glad I did, because it's it shows you the mystery. Like every single woman's story is different, and how she experienced every it's just all so different. You know, I like to find answers, and I found no answers. And yeah, so I think that uncertainty, and being aware that your rite of passage is going to be exactly what your birth is. And if your birth is everything that you have said that you didn't want, that's your rite of passage too. And it's so it's kind of coming to these types of things is what I'm looking at really bringing forth in what I'm doing. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like if I had been pregnant and had a birthed a child maybe even 10 years ago, I just purely based on my grip of how I thought back then it should be for me, I can totally imagine what I would have created just by my needing for it to have been a particular way. And my resistance to like mainstream medicine, and my resistance to hospitals, and my resistance to like allopathic interventions would have probably meant that my initiation was going to be straight through that channel, and really showed me where my gripping and my resistance was ultimately would have been my medicine for sure. And I feel like I'm really glad for myself that I haven't done that yet, because I can see how I would have created a really intense experience by avoiding the worries and just like, it's going to be fine, it's going to be fine, it's going to be fine, you know, because it's so funny how we say trust my body, because again, we say that we're trusting it, but by not addressing the worry and the fear that is showing up in the body in the preparation, we're actually not trusting it, because the body is showing us this is what I'm feeling right now. And we just like pop it aside, and that's totally fine. Like you said, like all of the experiences that we have, the lead up, the avoiding of the worry is just as much of a part of the initiation as presencing the worry. It's just going to be different stages and different layers and different pieces. And I think for a lot of people, their first birth highlights what they did or didn't do that they would like to kind of bring into the second time. And the second time offers them a different set of medicine, because they address it, if they're doing it consciously, typically in a very different way to how they did it the first time, if the first time offered them some medicine and some pain potentially. I think it's just interesting how we as a society say, I'm going to trust, but actually we're not trusting at all, because we're not actually listening.
Yeah, that's so true, because it is that primal instinct of fear that is trying to get our attention to do something, and to look at something deeply. And yeah, but like you say, that can be your rite of passage too, if you choose not to. And yeah, it's it's an interesting one for sure.
Every single time is a rite of passage as well, because as you've just said, Carissa, like one birth is completely different to the other in the same person, because they're different experiences. And that was absolutely my experience too, just like you said with yours, Lynley. And if you're listening to this and it sparked something within you, and you know that there's parts of you that haven't allowed yourself to just speak of different aspects of your birthing experience, or even this last bit of the conversation about trusting your body. I know then once I had children and they were going, my youngest, for instance, she taught me a lot. Like I went on massive rite of passage with her and her health, and really knowing what trusting the body is about. And every single time we experience this, we get an opportunity to go deeper and deeper. And so that's what I feel today's conversation has been about, is using birth, not using our children, but like using our depth of relationship with another human to be able to go deeper within ourselves and ask, well, what is the purpose of this for me? And yeah, I feel like it's been a really nourishing conversation. So
Yeah.
How can people best get in touch with you?
I've got my website, lynleyerin.com, and it's got all the contact forms and everything. Otherwise, I'm on Facebook, just Lynley Erin 13, I think. And then Seasons and Circles, they better find me on Facebook too, as my business page on there.
And are you doing the birth stories now? Are you helping people with their birth stories?
I have got a list of people that I am getting through in my apprenticeship, and I am taking names for people from September, if they want to have sessions from September. Yeah.
So if you know, get onto it.
Yeah.
She's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I appreciate you.
Really beautiful.
Yeah.
See you next time.
Bye.